Well, it is go time for all of those of you who have been sitting at home twiddling your thumbs, waiting for fantasy football season to begin. What are you doing?
I don't know.
The time is now. I'm Lauren Shehadi, alongside Jamey Eisnenberg, and I want to start off this video with my confession.
Uh-oh.
I'm like Usher. I watched the T.O. reality show.
Do you really?
And I like it.
Do you really?
I do. Don't judge.
When are we going to see the Lauren Shehadi reality?
That will never happen. No one would be interested in that.
The
Can
LS show.
Can we get to business? T.O.'s debut in Buffalo has come and gone, and the Bills have a lot to work on. That much is clear from the first game.
The Bills do have a lot to work on. You know, you see what Buffalo has in store. They're trying to run this no-huddle offense. I got a chance to speak with Fred Jackson earlier in training camp, and he was talking about this new offense that Turk Schonert is installing there, the offensive coordinator in Buffalo. And we saw its debut against Tennessee. Now, T.O. did look good. You know, 2 catches in the first quarter. You know, didn't obviously get a lot of action because it's the first preseason game. But I thought what they did in getting Terrell Owens involved was the right thing to do. Now, Trent Edwards did have that poor interception going into the end zone there, so that's something that he needs to work on. But the biggest cause for concern when looking at Buffalo was the way that Marshawn Lynch ran. They didn't open a lot of holes. And when you talk about they lose Jason Peters this offseason, their star offensive lineman, a lot of new guys coming into the offensive line for Buffalo. That's the biggest cause for concern there. We know Lynch is going to miss the first 3 games because of the suspension, so we'll see what happens with Fred Jackson. But that's the biggest cause for concern there, and also not really going in Lee Evans' direction. That's something I think Buffalo needs to work on.
And as a whole, they kind of look sluggish. They did start camp 1 week before the Titans, which is kind of telling. Speaking of the Titans, I want to talk about Kerry Collins. Looked pretty comfortable. Said he was pretty impressed with how he played. Were you?
I think so. You know, you look at Tennessee and what they're trying to do. Interesting from last year because Terry Collins came in as the backup in 2008 to Vince Young. No question about it that he's the starter based on the way he played last year, and I think you saw in the debut, you know, outside of the big trick play on the special teams where the punter scored a touchdown there, Kerry Collins was probably the most impressive. He was able to find some of his receivers. First pass of the game goes to Nate Washington, new free agent acquisition there for the Titans. We saw Algie Crumpler get involved a little bit. That was a big surprise because we know that they did have Bo Scaife as the tight end, and then they drafted Jared Cook as the rookie there. So to see Crumpler still involved, that's a good sign. The running game is still going to be the same thing. It was Chris Johnson all the way down to inside the red zone, and then Lendell White comes in. He scores the touchdown. So that's still the same thing for fantasy owners. Johnson's still the better guy. Lendell White going to be more of a factor. Remember, he gave up drinking tequila.
I do remember.
And that's going to help him lose. Well, it did help him lose,
a good thing, right?
lose some weight. I'm still curious to see if they'll give Lendell White some more carries early in the game, not just make him just a short yardage guy. So I think Lendell White's going to have a big season this year, also entering a contract year.
So you like what you saw from the Titans so far. Are you going to like what you see from Roddy White, the Falcons Pro Bowler, signing that 6-year contract extension, ending the holdout, getting right there in offense, getting into that offense? What do you think? What are you going to see from him? Let's check out his numbers.
That's the big thing, is the fact that he's finally signed. You know, we hate to see guys hold out. Mostly it's running backs, though, that you're concerned about when they hold out. Now, Roddy White's been working out in Alabama, getting ready for his debut in training camp, and I think the fact that he signed before the preseason game started, that's a good sign. So Roddy White's still worth drafting as a low-end number 1, high-end number 2 fantasy wide receiver. You know, he has the rapport already with quarterback Matt Ryan. This offense is poised to take off. We saw Michael Turner have a great year last year. I do think he'll take a little bit of a step back. We've talked about this already with the curse of 370. He had over 370 carries, so that's something to keep in mind. But when you look at the weapons that Matt Ryan has around him, Roddy White, Tony Gonzalez, they do lose a promising wide receiver in Harry Douglas, which we'll get to in a little bit. But you see Michael Jenkins. This whole receiving core, this whole offense around Matt Ryan, now that Roddy White is in camp, I think we'll see the Falcons put up lots of points this year.
Okay, well, a done deal there. Another done deal talking about no Sean Moreno. Let me. This is not rocket science. The Denver Broncos did not draft him to be a part-time player when you draft him 12th overall, right? So let's talk about playing time. What kind of playing time? Serious playing time for him?
You know, I think that they did draft him to be a featured running back, but I don't know if he's going to be the featured running back right away, because you talk about Lamont Jordan, Correll Buckalter, Ryan Terrain, Peyton Hillis. This is something that, as a matter of fact, before we came in here, I'm writing the story right now as part of our draft prep predictions, where you'll see that Moreno is not going to be a great fantasy option. I think he'll put up decent numbers, but I don't think he'll be the featured back that I think a lot of people were hoping for. Just a tough situation to sort of gauge right now, because Josh McDaniels, the new head coach there in Denver, has talked about all these guys. You know, he said that Jordan has been the starter. Buckalter's the fastest guy of the running back group at 30 years old. He's surprised that Ryan Terrain has played so well coming back from the torn ACL. Peyton Hillis also now in the mix as a receiver out of the backfield, because he's really done well. Mike Shanahan last year said he had the best hands of the group. So we'll have to see where Moreno fits in. He missed 8 days of training camp because of the holdouts. That's something he has to catch up on the offense there. So I think if you draft Moreno as a number 3 fantasy option, you're in good shape. If you draft him anything higher than that, you're going to be disappointed because I don't think he's going to give you the amount of touches and carries that he can get you.
I just drafted Buckhalter in our mock draft, right?
Smart move by you.
Thank you very much. From a done deal to a not-so-done deal, we're talking about money when it comes to Michael Crabtree. Wants to be paid like he's the best wide receiver in the class. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that was a big thing going into the draft. We know that he expected to be the first wide receiver taken, and then Oakland sort of does what the Raiders do, and they sort of threw a wrench in there, and they take Darius Hayward-Bay at the number 7 spot. So I think you'll see Crabtree. There's talks about him maybe sitting out his rookie season. I don't think that'll happen because that would really be almost a detriment to his career going forward. So he'll sign at some point. He may be signing right now while we're doing this video, but I think you have to sort of gauge the way that this thing is going. When guys hold out, especially rookies, that's not a good sign. A guy coming back from a foot injury, also not a good sign. And you look at the way that the 49ers passing game is taking shape. Still trying to figure out who the starting quarterback is going to be, whether it's Sean Hill or Alex Smith. We expect Hill to win the job there. But Josh Morgan is a wide receiver who's really stepped up, really going to play a big role this year. We know Isaac Bruce had the good year last year. Vernon Davis still trying to find his way there as the tight end, but I think he'll make some plays. And that's where Crabtree will sort of fit in as the 4th receiving option there, maybe even 5th, depending on some of these other guys that San Francisco has in the mix there. So I think the way that you're looking at Crabtree from a fantasy perspective, late round pick at this point. I don't think you should draft him to be as anything more than a number 4 option.
Trying to get paid, aren't we all, right? Before we leave you, we are going to give you a little dose of reality, and I'm talking about injuries. You're already thinking it is the preseason. Really, enough with the injuries. But let's check out that list. Reggie Bush, of course, on there again with that nagging knee injury. Jonathan Stewart with Achilles, a different injury from last year. What are we thinking? Yeah,
the 2 guys at the bottom of the list there with Bush and Stewart, they're fine so far, but they have missed some practices. Bush with that nagging knee injury, as you mentioned, Stewart with the Achilles problem from the offseason. They're both expected to be fine for the start of the year, but just keep an eye on how these injuries go, especially in the preseason. When you talk about the top 3 guys, Harry Douglas, as we said, out for the season with a torn ACL, a guy that was going to play a role for the Falcons, not a big fantasy guy. Donnie Avery is the one that's a concern right now. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a stress fracture in his foot. That's going to limit what Mark Bulger is able to do, going to limit what this passing game is able to do. If you're looking for late round value in deeper leagues, Ronald Curry now becomes a much more prevalent option for guys to target, because I think you're looking at, they traded for him from Detroit. He's probably going to get released by the Lions, but he's the most proven receiver now that Avery is out on this team, someone I think that could play a role. And then when you talk about Mark Clayton, this is a guy that I think a lot of fantasy owners were looking at when Derek Mason retired. Now that Mason comes back, Clayton not so much of a factor anymore, but he's going to miss 2 to 3 preseason games with a hamstring problem. Guy just can't get over these injuries. It's been something that's ruined his career up to this point.
Okay, let's talk about talking with Jamey, shall we? You guys can do it. When? Tell them when.
Tuesday, 3 p.m. You can also chat with Dave Richard at some point this week. Check out our chats. Check out Rate My Draft. And definitely follow all the mock drafts that we do, because this is draft time.
My mock draft team is money.
Your team
I would like
good.
to say thank you very much.
You have Terrell Owens on your team, too.
For myself. Hey, I follow this reality show, follow this real life, whatever.
The JS show.
Thanks, Jamey. For everything fantasy football, you know where to go. We got you covered. We'll see you.